candidates for the 3rd Congressional District. I ask those candidates to please move toward the podium. Congressman Duncan, the incumbent Republican, was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2011. His challenger, Mary Guerin, the Democrat, is a resident of Anderson and an educator. This is her first race for Congress. We are glad that both of them are here together, and we welcome them both. And we will begin by their opening statements. They have 3 minutes. So again, Ms. Guerin, Congressman Duncan, please remember to talk about your motivations for running for office and your priorities if chosen for a seat in the Congress. Following ABC order, we will begin with Congressman Duncan. Your opening statement, sir.
Thank you, and let me start off by thanking Lander University for inviting us to this beautiful campus. Dr. Constantino and the faculty, it's great to be here. You know, Ronald Reagan said we should carry a banner of no pale pastels but one of bold colors, which make it unmistakably clear where we stand on the issue. When I ran in 2010, I used that, and I have been very clear about where I stand on the issues. I'm a constitutional conservative. I believe in limited government, free markets, and individual liberties. I went to Washington really to focus on 3 main principles: jobs, energy, and the Founding Fathers. What could I do as a congressman, and what could we do in Congress to unleash and unbridle the innovative and entrepreneurial spirit that Americans have, to help Americans create jobs, retain those jobs, grow their businesses, and help our economy get back on track? What we're seeing right now are the results of that, with an economy that is on fire. 4.2% GDP growth in the 2nd quarter, 3.5% GDP growth in the 3rd quarter, historic high employment rates, historic low unemployment rates across all demographics. Jobs. I look forward to working to keep those jobs here in America, allowing repatriation of overseas income to be invested in American economy. Energy. What can I do to help with energy policy? Truly an all-of-the-above energy approach. Now, energy is necessary for the engines of our society. Serving on the Energy and Commerce Committee, I'm now in a position to continue furthering energy policy for the all-the-above approach. And then Founding Fathers. Being a constitutional conservative, understanding that our Founding Fathers wanted limited government. They wanted to empower the individuals and the states. We have a Republican form of government, and we have federalism, where the states play a role in this. What is the role of the federal government? I only look to the Founding Fathers for that. The Constitution is my guide. I carry a copy in my pocket, and it's not just a prop. I'll read it. And this is important as a congressman to make sure that we do follow the Constitution. Jobs, energy, and the Founding Fathers. If you take the first letter of those, that's an acronym that spells Jeff, and I believe Jeff is a winning message. I look forward to earning your vote next year. Thank you, and
Thank you very much, Congressman. I should tell our audience, if you've looked at this program, we have a lot to pack in. So, if you will hold your applause, please, we will clap all that we can when each of the candidates finish a race, and you can really clap then. But if we interrupt ourselves all night, you're going to be here a long time. So, with that, let me just thank the Congressman, and now, Ms. Guerin, your opening statement.
Good evening, Lander University. My name is Mary Guerin, and I am the Democratic nominee for Congress. I am indeed the 5'0" mama and teacher who is ready to become your next Congresswoman in South Carolina 3. We need representatives for all of SC3. We need a representative who does not simply represent corporations, who has not been bought and paid for by corporations. So I got into this race to ensure that everyone has affordable health care, everyone has an equal and quality education, and a living wage. As a mother and teacher, I am concerned about the future of our children. So much is at stake this election. And I could not sit idly by and watch our children's safety, their education, their health care, job security, and environment be sacrificed for a big old game of political football. As a mama bear, that just does not work for me. My kids and your kids deserve better. Too many elected officials have allowed special interests and corporate donors to dictate their priorities. Americans are not represented fairly in Washington. Unlike my opponent, I have pledged to take zero corporate money because I believe the dark money has created the corrupt political swamp that we are now swimming in Washington, D.C. I actually agreed with Donald Trump when he said we must drain the swamp. However, I would say that in the last 2 years, the swamp has gotten even murkier and more corrupt. This is truly a grassroots campaign by and for the people. I will answer to no one, regardless of their party affiliation, their wealth, or their status. By the way, I have already earned quite the reputation in the South Carolina Democratic Party for standing up to my friends, our party leaders, when they are wrong, when they utilize divisive rhetoric, when they divide us. I may be small, but I am mighty, and I will bring that fight to Washington. I will stand up to the opposition and to my own party. The only people I must speak for are you, the working people here, the good people of SC3. My opponent consistently sides with his rich donors and corporations on issues from healthcare to net neutrality, drug prices, offshore drilling, and yes, tax cuts for the millionaires and billionaires. Corporations and oil executives do not represent us. They do not represent SC3, and neither does my opponent. We can no longer be distracted by wedge issues. So let's remember that in order for us to come together, we must fight for bipartisan measures in which we are representing all of SC3.
All right, thank you
you
very much. Thank you. Okay. So we're off to the races. The first question is for Congressman Duncan first, and then we'll move to Ms. Guerin. Our 3rd congressional district, much like most of South Carolina, is tied to our global economy, and that fact seems not lost on many citizens, particularly those that filled out our online form. President Trump has challenged U.S. trade policy, and he has introduced some tariffs since entering office. Please give us your views on trade policy and the effects of trade on our district.
So I understand what the president's trying to do. We've been in a trade war my entire lifetime. The issue is that America hasn't been fighting back. We've allowed the foreign countries to impose tariffs on American products and in their country, while demanding the United States lower its tariffs to allow unfettered access for foreign businesses to sell their product here at home. I believe we have a trade imbalance for a reason, and that is the reason. President Trump gets that. So lowering the tariffs and challenging our adversaries on the economy and on trade to adjust their tariffs to make a more level and even playing field is advantageous to American businesses. Now, we do have some businesses in the 3rd District and across the country that have been negatively impacted on the front end by the trade policy. Our office has worked tremendously hard with a lot of industries like Greenfield Industries up in Seneca to help them get the exclusions that were needed so that they can continue operating under that trade policy and the tariffs. Now, the Democrat chairman came to an event and said that BMW was going to close. BMW refuted that and said that they were actually hiring and hired, I think, about 1,500 more employees. So the trade policies are working when you see the steel industry rebound in this country, the aluminum industry rebound in this country, and a lot of products that we need to help make America great again.
Ms. Guerin?
Actually, the chairman said that production would be moved, which is true. There were plans to move production to China before this trade war. Guys, my husband has worked at BMW manufacturing for 19 years. He started on the production line. And because of that company, he will be graduating from college in May with his Bachelor's of Business degree. They have been very good to our family. And there has been some miscommunication, well, not miscommunication, I would say conflict in communication about whether these tariffs are going to negatively or adversely affect their jobs and production. But what I would urge you to think of is common sense. Common sense tells us that when a company is going to expand in China, in South Africa, in Mexico, and then you have the United States giving them the biggest headache of all, charging these tariffs, imposing these tariffs, what do you think that company is going to do? they're going to continue to move their production on to other countries where they don't have that same headache. So as a working woman, as a working family, I can tell you, Sean and I are just not willing to take that risk. We have a kid in college, we have a kid in elementary school, and we need our job security. So I see this trade war as needless and frankly, reckless. That's how I feel about it.
Thank you. Do you rebuttal, Congressman?
Yes, I was waiting for that.
Sorry.
Thank you. As a small business owner that actually created jobs and signed at the front of a paycheck and not the back of his paycheck, I'm willing to give the tariffs an opportunity to work. And what I see happening is a 3.5% GDP growth for this country. I see jobs coming back. In fact, for the first time ever, we have 7.1 million jobs looking for employees, not employees looking for jobs. That is the result of good America First trade policies and economic policies put forth by the Republicans.
All right. All right, the next question, we'll go with Ms. Guerin first. Staying within economics, we turn to fiscal or budgetary policy. Citizens ask lots of questions in this regard. Therefore, please discuss your views on the federal budget, addressing taxes and tax reform, spending priorities, and the federal deficit.
Thank you. Congressman Duncan and I agree on this. We have a spending problem. I've heard him say that multiple times. And what I would also say is our priorities as a nation are just a little bit messed up. We recently, a year ago, our government passed a tax legislation that Congressman Duncan is very proud of, and it will result in a $1 trillion deficit within a matter of months. $2 trillion in a decade. And guys, I'm a working American. I'm a teacher. I got about 25, 30 bucks more a month in my paycheck as a result of that massive tax cut. The people who benefited were billionaires, millionaires, corporate donors, probably a lot of the supporters like Halliburton and the Koch brothers and ExxonMobil, who have given lots of money, over $500,000, by the way, to Congressman Duncan. Those are the people benefiting from this, and we're creating this deficit. Now, when it comes to hurricane funding, I absolutely say we have to protect our vulnerable citizens in this country. But when it comes to making billionaires richer and creating this crippling debt for our country, I say our priorities are out of line, and we need representatives who have not been bought and paid for by corporations and who will stand up for working Americans.
All right, Congressman.
So we don't have a revenue problem in this nation, we have a spending problem. When I went to Washington, our debt for the nation was around $14.3 trillion. We currently are approaching $22 trillion. We're spending more money than we're bringing in. We've got to address the spending side of the equation. And a lot of that spending comes about because of mandatory spending, which is 46% of the 2/3 mandatory spending that we never deal with in Congress. But I was proud to support tax reform, and I look forward to the Democrats and others helping us with Tax Reform 2.0 so that we can make the individual tax rates permanent. One thing we wanted to do in tax reform, but the Senate parliamentarian wouldn't work with us to allow that in budget reconciliation, and not a single Democrat voted for you to be able to keep more of your hard-earned money. Tax reform helps South Carolinians. South Carolinian wage earners have more money in their paycheck, got bonuses, got 401k contribution increases, and possibly got raises and better jobs. Everyone in this room knows someone, brother, sister, cousin, maybe somebody in their Sunday school class that got a job that they didn't have 2 years ago, or maybe got a raise or a better job. And that's the result of tax reform. So we don't have a revenue problem in this country. We're at historic highs for federal revenue, but we do have a spending problem. We need to address our debt. And with that, I yield back.
Rebuttal?
Yes, there's a spending problem, but it's going to the wrong people. Our good congressman has voted on multiple occasions to not fund victims of natural disasters, including the most recent hurricane, because of the deficit, which is exploding. But when we are granting billionaires a tax break, that just doesn't seem morally feasible. By the way, the economy is booming for people who own stocks and bonds. My wages have stagnated. I guarantee you yours have too. We need to set our priorities.
My opponent keeps talking about the disaster funding.
We're going to move to the next one.
We're moving to the next one. All right, next question for you, Congressman. We've had lots of questions from citizens about health care and insurance, particularly wanting to know the candidates' views about the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare. Please briefly describe your policy views on health insurance coverage and what you would support in this regard.
Yeah, before I address that, let me address the disaster funding because my opponent keeps talking about it. I'll get to health care in a second. But I voted for disaster funding and voted against some disaster funding.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say that the congressman and his opponent are able to use the time in whatever way they see fit. Now, clearly, for my mental state, I'd rather them go with the question we just asked because it's hard to keep up going back and forth, as has already been demonstrated when I forgot to give him a rebuttal chance. But let us give Congressman Duncan a chance and then he can move on. Okay, go ahead.
So when Hurricane Sandy hit this country, we had 4 tranches or 4 different bills to provide disaster funding. On the 4th tranche that I voted against, we saw a Christmas tree. We saw a lot of gifts under that Christmas tree for other states. In fact, the state of Idaho got funding out of the Hurricane Sandy money. If you can tell me how Hurricane Sandy affected the state of Idaho, I may have been more willing to vote for it, but I didn't think the storm got that far. In the most recent Florence hurricane that came through, within days of that hurricane, they were requesting disaster funding without any empirical data on the levels of damage. I want to work on real numbers. And that's why we voted against that. Then they throw that hurricane money into another Christmas tree bill with a lot of other funding. And those are problems with Washington. Now, you mentioned the Affordable Care Act. So people in the 3rd District realize that there's nothing affordable about the Affordable Care Act. What they have seen is they were told a bill of goods when the Affordable Care Act was proposed. They were told they could keep their doctors if they liked them. They could keep their insurance company if they liked them. They were going to save on average $2,500 per household in savings across the country. None of that has come true. What they have seen is increase in premiums, an increase in out-of-pocket max, and an increase in deductibles, to the point that it really is just catastrophic insurance. It's not medical insurance that's helping them meet their medical bills on a day-to-day basis. I want to work with my colleagues and have under the AHCA, the attempt to repeal Obamacare that John McCain killed, to repeal Obamacare and put some free market principles in place. You should be able to buy insurance across state lines. You should be able to buy insurance that they can buy in Tennessee or Texas.
Congressman, all right, we're out of time. Ms. Guerin, the health care question.
I would first like to say the Christmas tree package that is the GOP tax scam concerns me more than a Christmas tree package that helps people whose homes have been destroyed and they're left homeless. In terms of the Affordable Care Act, it's not perfect. I've acknowledged that from the beginning, but the congressman and his colleagues have had 8 years. 8 years. They all had control last year. All branches of government to come up with a better alternative. Guys, we cannot trust the GOP on health care. We simply can't trust them. I don't think that pre-existing conditions was even in your vocabulary until 2 weeks ago, to be honest. And I'm telling you, I will fight. I know this. This is my life. This is my students' life. This is the lives of working people in this district. I will fight to find common sense solutions, and I will absolutely work with Donald Trump or anyone. I have done that in my entire career. But we have got to get beyond this blind partisanship where people are bowing down to their party. And if it's the opposite, and by the way, you mentioned Senator McCain, he is one of my all-time heroes. God rest his soul.
Well, I'll tell you what, South Carolinians will have more presents under a Christmas tree this year because they have more money in their paycheck thanks to the tax reform, thanks to the jobs that they've got.
Before we go on, I'd like to remind the audience that if we could hold the applause, we'll get through this in 2 hours, not 4. All right, this one starts off with you, Ms. Garrett. Illegal immigration and border security is a topic in the news and on voters' minds. Although this topic has economic, humanitarian, and security dimensions, please summarize your views on border security and illegal immigration.
It absolutely is a concern for all of us, and a quick synopsis is that I support immigration reform, common sense and humane reform. What that means is that we need to enforce the laws we have. That's called attrition, which actually means we've got the laws on the books, we just need to follow them. However, I'm also humanitarian, and ripping babies out of mama's arms at borders as a mother, that's just wrong. As a Christian, I honestly, it breaks my heart. My 12-year-old she was very astute at an event I attended. And by the way, we've had like 10 town halls in the last year and a half and dozens of open forums to answer questions. Well, I got one of the most difficult questions from my own daughter. She said, "Mama, what in the world would you do? What would you do if you can't rip the baby out of the mama's arm?" What I would do is if they can't get through, then they go back together. You don't separate families. I don't support the border wall because first of all, we were promised that Mexico would pay for it. We've already talked about the deficit, as my opponent is very much concerned about when it comes to hurricane funding. But we were promised Mexico would pay for it, and they're not going to do it. So it's not prudent. I don't think it would work. This issue is a wedge issue. There are many. This is one of many. These people who are migrating here, they're refugees seeking a better place, and as Americans, we should do everything we can to legally help people who are in need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congressman.
So 49% of all illegals who reside in the United States came here legally. They're known as visa overstays. They had a permission slip, a visa from our government to come here to school, to work, as tourists, other things. They came here legally. We have a visa overstay problem. That's low-hanging fruit. We know who these people are. They had an interview at the consulate or embassy. We know where they were going. They may have been coming to Lander University under an F1 student visa and just decided to stay. That's enforcement of the law. I do believe in American sovereignty. I believe that we are a sovereign nation. I do believe in the wall because I believe the wall will not only just stop illegal immigration, but it will also thwart drug trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, and other terrorism elements that have tried successfully and unsuccessfully to come into this country. So border security is important for a sovereign nation. Now, we have a horde of people coming to try to seek asylum into this country, they say. But they also say that if they can't come here and get asylum, that they will try to circumvent and enter the country illegally. And that, folks, that's just wrong. We were informed today by Ambassador Gutierrez from Mexico that there are a lot of violent elements within these caravans. People that have attacked the Mexican police and army as they tried to come into Mexico. If you're seeking asylum under international norms, you ask for asylum after you cross the first international border. They didn't do that in Mexico. They didn't do that from Honduras into Guatemala. They're coming to the United States because they want to take advantage of our benefits and take advantage of our country and our laws.
Thank you. Rebuttal opportunity.
This is yet another deflection of what is the most important issue in for Americans now, and that's health care. We have a current administration that, again, they want another massive tax break for billionaires and millionaires to gut Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. We have people who are trying to escape a war-torn country for asylum. If they don't qualify, we don't let them in. It's that simple. We have the laws on the books.
Thank you.
We're now going to turn to another topic. South Carolina has its citizens that want to protect our natural resources, but also are interested in our energy needs. Many citizens in our state are particularly interested in topics such as offshore drilling and nuclear energy. Would you please discuss your views on environmental and energy policy? We'll begin with Congressman Duncan.
As I said in my opening remarks, I'm an all-of-the-above energy guy. I like wind and solar. I think it's groovy technology. I think we've got to get the battery storage part of it right so that the power is available, not when it's being produced, when the sun's shining and the wind's blowing, but it can be used when it's necessary. That might be at night or on cloudy days or non-windy days. But I do support offshore drilling, and it works in the Gulf of Mexico. It works off the coast of Alaska. It works in the North Sea off of the coast of Norway and England. So we've been doing offshore a long time. And my position is, what harm does it do to look and find out what resources might be off the coast of South Carolina? Because we might have an abundance of natural gas. Because the seismic technology that's available today has been used off the coast of Suriname, for instance, and found 32 trillion cubic feet of natural gas that now Suriname's going to take advantage of. What if we find 32 trillion cubic feet of natural gas 60 miles offshore? You wouldn't see the rigs from shore, but now South Carolina's playing a part in the energy matrix and renaissance in this country, producing clean-burning natural gas and producing those jobs onshore to support the offshore industry. Folks, the only way you would know there was a rig offshore would get in a boat and go out there and take a look at it. If you get in a boat and go out there, then take a fishing rod, because they're great fish attractors. An LNG terminal onshore to support selling LNG to Germany, which has said they're going to buy non-Putin, non-Russia gas and buy U.S. gas. South Carolina now plays a part in the geopolitics selling gas to Europe. I just think that's a winning solution for the state. Now, I will say if there's oil, it's a whole different conversation.
All right, Ms. Garrett.
I actually was honored to earn the endorsement of the Sierra Club of South Carolina, and I learned they don't give that endorsement easily. It was quite a coup. Thank you, Ann. But that is because I support clean energy, whether that's nuclear, solar, or wind. I do not support offshore drilling, and I would say ask the people in the Gulf of Mexico, down in Florida, where I vacation every summer in Destin. Ask them if they know what it's like to have irresponsible drilling on their shores. People committed suicide, their economic livelihoods were destroyed, not to mention the marine life that suffered as a result of that spill. It's irresponsible. Even Governor Henry McMaster, this is not a partisan issue, folks, not a partisan issue. McMaster does not support offshore drilling. And guess what? In Florida, they asked to be exempt from offshore drilling, and the president granted them that. Gee, I wonder why. You think maybe because he has property there. I know my family, my friends, we vacation on the coast of South Carolina. Many of them own homes there. We don't want to see our properties destroyed. We don't want to see marine life die. It's irresponsible, and I would say Congressman Duncan embraces offshore drilling, as he has said before, because guess what? Gas and oil is his biggest contributor.
Rebuttal opportunity, Congressman?
Yeah, so what harm does it do to look to go find what's out there? We may find natural gas. As I said earlier, if we find that there's oil off the coast, that's a different story. But there's still a difference between what happened in the Gulf of Mexico with Deepwater Horizon and our coastal areas. Deep water in the Gulf was 5,600 feet they were drilling in. Off the coast of South Carolina, you're a little over 100 feet where the gas fields may be. So it's, apples and oranges. But you can't be short-sighted with energy production, because we are very dependent on the Middle East for our energy sources, and we can be self-dependent here.
All right, we're out of time.
All right, next question. Ms. Guerin, you start off. Lots of questions that were addressed to us were involving political rhetoric and civility, and particularly the role of social media. Andre from Greenwood, for example, called the culture of DC toxic. Many citizens seem to share the worry of Maxine from Clinton, who said she is deeply concerned about political discourse in our country. To further quote Maxine, we ask this: what can you do to help tone down the rhetoric and bring back civility?
That is such a good question, and I too share the concern. That's one of the reasons I got into this. Guys, we're the United States of America. I actually wrote a post when Congressman Duncan and I saw each other in Clemson last year. We're Americans, we're South Carolinians, we are Clemson Tigers fans. Come on, y'all.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers, that's right.
Go Bearcats.
And I truly...
Bearcats, go Bearcats.
There you go.
But I believe that we're in this because we love our country. And I don't care if you're a official, if you're in a position of power, your words matter. Our kids are listening. And